Welcome to the lesson of the week from thisisclassicalguitar.com, and today we're going to talk about a well-rounded technique, and we're going to use a specific example of using MA scales to improve arpeggios in tremolo. So last week I put out a video on tremolo and lots of people commented that it helped them a lot, but a lot of people also emailed me saying they've had trouble with tremolo in the past and they've had trouble getting that technique really going and really working for them. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and I also want to talk about the fact that next week we're going to dive into the Villalobos Etude number 1. And that's the one with the fast exchanges at the top. That little fast exchange with MA at the top, we'll talk about that as well. So let's start with the example of using MA scales to improve arpeggios or tremolo. So I've taught lots of students that will come in and they'll be saying that they're having trouble reaching speeds, higher speeds with their tremolo or higher speeds with their arpeggios. And then sometimes I'll ask them, can you just play me an MA scale? So an MA scale would just be a normal scale using MA. So M, A, 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 M, and then just and back down, right? So just getting comfortable using MA. To go up and down through scales, right? And we could even talk about three-fingered scales like A, M, I, A, M, I, A, M, I, A, M, I, A, M, I. It's using those three-fingered scales as well. So sometimes students can't do very well a MA, basic MA scale, just like a normal scale using MA, but get it even and get it really comfortable and relaxed, and also maybe even with a little bit of speed, maybe some speed bursts. Just really getting those exchanges between M and A into a zone where it's more reflex oriented and it's not taking that much effort and you're relaxed. Because sometimes when we're trying to do other techniques like tremolo, the rapidity, like the rapid nature of those fingers will rely on how well you can control those fingers and how well you can use those fingers to do what was needed for the particular technique. So I have found, and I found this with myself even, that when I started really practicing MA scales a lot, and actually I did it it was like 12 years ago, I was doing like a grade 10 RCM exam, and I did that grade 10 RCM exam, and I'd never practiced, well, I'd practiced MA scales before. I shouldn't say that I haven't, but I practiced them up to the speed and just really got interested in how well I could do them. And it really stimulated me. But what I noticed is after practicing a lot of MA scale work, my arpeggios got better as well. Now, I was also practicing arpeggios at the time, but nevertheless, I noticed that something about having more control over my scale work with those fingers, it kind of bled into the other parts of my technique where I was practicing either tremolo or arpeggios with those fingers. So the idea here is really that you can't just necessarily say oh, I'm bad at tremolo. You shouldn't say that to yourself just for your own self-esteem, but you should also just think about the fact that oh, maybe it's just my technique isn't strong enough overall. So if you're having trouble with your tremolo, maybe you need to also, work on tremolo, for sure, work on tremolo, but also take a look at other parts of your technique as well. So this brings us into another section of the video where we want to talk about a well-rounded technique session. So I think the first thing we want to say is finding a good teacher is really, really important. So find a good teacher. And because that teacher will organize the material that you practice in a progressive manner. So a progressive manner means that they'll give you easy exercises first, and once they think you've accomplished those easy exercises, they'll increase the difficulty of the exercises slightly, but not too much, and then you'll use what you had before and apply it to what you have next. So like lots of books like Isneola's book, The Path to Virtuosity, that I was talking about last time, and also the like my 20 favorite exercises, starts off with really easy exercises, something like first it starts off with slurs vertically across the fingerboard, which is relatively easy. And you work on your slurs and you get them really solid. Then you apply it to horizontal slurs, which might be a little bit harder because it involves like shifts and stuff like that. And then maybe after that you'd like do it with an actual shift, with octaves or something like that. So the exercise would get more difficult, but if you did master the first one, it won't be that much more difficult. So a teacher will help you organize your material progressively. That's really important. The other thing that a good teacher will do is they'll find out things about your playing that you didn't even know. Like they'll discover that maybe you're holding the guitar like just slightly at a wrong angle, or maybe your footstool is not quite the right height, or maybe you're holding your wrist just slightly up. But it might be something that you just didn't notice yourself. It's really easy to not notice things sometimes because you're practicing and you're trying to keep track of your right hand and your left hand and all the notes you're supposed to be doing. But a teacher can watch you from the other side and kind of just say like, I think that you need to focus on this, this, and this. So finding a good teacher is super important. Now, a well-rounded technique, there's so many things we could mention when we talk about a well-rounded technique, but for lots of guitarists, this is gonna be some basic things like scales and arpeggios and shifts and slurs. That's hammer-ons and pull-offs on guitar. Stretches, maybe some speed exercises, some coordination or finger independence exercises, and then also some musical exercises such as musical phrasing or dynamics, so softs and louds, or maybe it has to do with theory, like analyzing your works and understanding the form of the work. So these well-rounded sessions might be really important to improving that one specific technique that you want. It's really hard for students to just dive into something like a tremolo piece if they haven't yet played basic arpeggios and scales with MA. Trying to throw all the fingers together is a lot harder. So having a well-rounded technique session is super important. So my recommendation is that next week we're going to work on Villa-Lobos Etude No. 1, and that it goes through this arpeggio pattern that has this exchange at the top with MA. And it doesn't matter if the piece isn't at your level, you can just watch the video and get some tips from it, or you can just practice it on open strings. But that MA exchange at the top, if it gives you trouble, then maybe you should be practicing either some small arpeggio exercises with MA, or you could try out some scales with MA. If you're not familiar with some movable scales, just use a first position C major scale. And I would say the names of the fingers out loud. M, A, 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 M. And just keep track of those fingers really well so that you gain control. And do it with rest stroke as well. And free stroke. Maybe do it with some dynamics. And maybe some different rhythms. Do it in just so many different ways until you feel like MA, you have so much control over it. And that way, when you go to these patterns, you can just lock into that pattern and hopefully you'll have the control to use those two fingers. And then when we dive into that piece, it's mainly just going to be grabbing chords and doing that pattern. And then progressively speeding it up. And just going from there. So that's the idea behind a well-rounded technique, and using certain technique exercises to improve completely different techniques. So I'll see you next week for Villa Lobos Etude number 1.